tomorrow they will come together. Wolf.
All right, Sondland, thanks very much. Sondland Srifati over at the White House. We're back with the three members of Congress. I want to get your thoughts on what you want to hear specifically from the president tomorrow. Very important address he's going to be delivering at this memorial service. But first, there were some powerful words today we heard from Dr. Brian Williams, a trauma surgeon who was treating the victims of this massacre in Dallas. I want you to listen to what he said.
We routinely care for multiple gunshot victims, but the preceding days of more black men dying at the hands of police officers affected me. I think the reasons are obvious. I fit that demographic of individuals, but I abhor what has been done to these officers and I grieve with their families. I understand the anger and the frustration and distrust of law enforcement, but they are not the problem. The problem is the lack of open discussions about the impact of race relations in this country. And I think about it every day, that I was unable to save those cops when they came here that night. It weighs on my mind constantly. This killing, it has to stop. Black men dying and being forgotten, people retaliating against the people that are sworn to defend us. We have to come together and end all this.
He's the trauma surgeon at Parkland Memorial Hospital. Congressman, he treated so many of those victims, but you see how emotional he is on this issue. I wonder if you can relate to what he just said.
Oh, absolutely. I think that each and every one of us, I have a young son, like Cedric has a young son, and I worry as my son gets older, he's in elementary school now, what his interactions with the police will be like. On the other hand, I understand that if we're going to have a civil society, a society with the free press, a society with the democracy that we have to have police protect us, or we will have anarchy. And so it's a balance, and I hope that President Obama will talk about bringing the community together, that we need the police and the community to have a better relationship. I think that he will touch on those things, and I think it's a message the nation needs to hear.
You heard Dr. Williams say we're not talking enough about it. We're sort of ignoring it right now.
Well, I think that whenever we lose a life, whether it's by the hands of a police officer or when we lose a police officer, the whole country mourns. But we're not having enough dialogue about what's happening on the streets in inner cities. And the president's words tomorrow can heal, but they can't stop what's going on. Congress has to act. We have to put more money back into community policing from when Clinton was president, whether we call it safe neighborhoods. But unless Congress sends a message to the country that we hear you, that we understand these young people, I am very fearful that it's going to be a long, hot, bloody summer. And I think that blood will be on the hands of Congress if we don't do something to act.
What do you want the president to say tomorrow, Congressman Ellison?
You know, the president has to convey to the whole of America that we can be safer and have good police service and have racial justice and inclusion. It's not one or the other, as so often is characterized. We actually need both, and we can have both, but we also he needs to challenge all of us to come out of our comfort zone a little bit. Police and community, all of us. We had 246 years of slavery, 100 years of Jim Crow, and only 50 years of anything else. We do have a racial legacy to overcome, but we can't overcome it if the president will help lead us in that direction and help everyone have their heart and their mind open a little bit more to real change.
You heard the president say on Saturday, race relations in our country right now, not as bad as some people are suggesting. You agree with him?
No, I completely agree with that. I think that we've made huge improvements. I can tell you I grew up in Fort Worth, and of course we have the same news as Dallas. Dallas is not far at all from Fort Worth, and the police department that Dallas had in the 1980s versus Chief Brown today, as far as racial tension and animosity is concerned, huge improvement. So yes, we've made huge strides in this country.
Same in Baton Rouge?
Well, I wouldn't talk about Baton Rouge. I would just say inner cities. And I don't think the race relations have actually changed all that much, especially...
You don't think it's getting better over the years?
I don't. I think that we had a point in time where race relations were getting better, but I think as the economy turned, President Obama became president, I think that everybody retreated back to their respective corners. But I can only speak for young African-American males. Young African-American males, because of over-incarceration, because of the war on drugs, feel like they are targets. And law enforcement views them as a danger to law enforcement. And unfortunately, they view law enforcement as a danger to them. And I think that if we can't fix that, then a lot of what we're doing will not reach the ultimate conclusion and won't hit home.
You see that in Minnesota as well?
Yeah, you know, in my state of Minnesota, a wonderful state, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the whole country, and yet the disparities are very, very wide. Average income in Minnesota is about $61,000 a year. For African Americans, it was $31,000 until it dropped to $27,000. And so there are vast disparities. And I think that, look, are things better than they were? Sure, but we come out of Jim Crow. We come out of a very bad history, and to be doing better than ever is not to be doing good. And so I just think we've got to work a lot harder on healing, and we have got to call on the business community, the law enforcement, and all sectors of American society to open up the doors of opportunity and to make sure that everybody feels included in the society.
Has the awful news of the past week brought, for example, the three of you closer together on these issues?
It has. And let me just say, because I want to be fair, the political discourse in this country has also added, I believe, to the bad race relations.
You think it's gotten,
absolutely,
it's deteriorated?
And I think that we bear a lot of the brunt of it. If we can't sit down and talk to each other, if we can't get past our differences, then what example are we setting for the country? But we're so negative and we're so nasty that I think that people feed into it. But I think the events of the last week have brought this Congress closer together, and I think it's going to bring the country closer together if we can all sit down and keep our eye on what's important, and that is a very peaceful, safe community with mutual respect.
You know, the three of us were together last week talking about, as relatively young black men, we all feel like that searching feels. I mean, we may have kids, but we also know that you take off the suit and put on the T-shirt, and we could be going through what Alton or Philando were going through, and we feel that personally and directly.
So when you're casually dressed and you're driving around Texas, are you fearful that a cop might stop you?
I have anxiety every day about being pulled
Every
over.
day?
Every day when I'm back home, and in D.C. for that matter.
Really?
When I'm not in
You
a suit.
too?
We're treated much, when I have on my suit and my congressional pin, even in the halls of the Capitol, I'm treated a lot differently by visitors and spectators when I'm dressed down and people don't realize that I'm a congressman. And I just think it's the world we live in, and I think that that's part of what we have to deal with. And then flip it, where in New Orleans you have